Welcome to the video presentation on managing daily activities. If you haven't watched the presentation on what is pain, please watch that first, as it will help you to understand the reason behind the recommendations in this video. The purpose of this video is to understand how we can manage activities in a way that doesn't increase our pain and fatigue. So remember, in the session on pain, I talked about the oversensitive alarm system, that pain that goes on for a long time becomes like an oversensitive alarm that goes off when there's no danger. Well, today we're looking at ways we can help our oversensitive system to calm down by changing the way we manage our activities. This is a reminder of the key concepts from that pain video. As I said, if you haven't watched it yet, please watch that one first. Before we start talking about how we manage activity, it's important that we understand why activity is important. Why do we do the things that we do? Well, we can tell how important activity is to us by how it makes us feel when we can't do things. We can feel frustrated and upset. We can feel worthless and useless. It can get us down. Many people with fibromyalgia say that they don't feel like the person they used to be, because they can't do the things they used to. Whether we are aware of it or not, we choose to do the things we do because of what's important to us, our values. We also undertake activities because of the roles that we have as a parent, carer, friend, employee, colleague, etc. We also have responsibilities, and the relationships we have will also guide the things we do. So, for example, perhaps you can't take your child to school because of the pain and fatigue. That activity may have a significance to you because it's part of your role as a parent, and that role is important to you. You may be able to do other things with your child, but you may feel like a rubbish parent because you can't take them to school. We may not be able to do everything that we once did. But understanding why those things are important means that we can perhaps look at alternative things that will still help us fulfill what is important to us. So, for example, perhaps if you can't take your child to school, you could spend time with them at the park if you had someone with you, or you could have quality time with them doing an activity sitting at home. If you have had fibromyalgia for any length of time, you will have noticed the changes, and you will probably have adapted a lot of what you do. Perhaps you've had to rest more, or use equipment to help you, or have to ask for help. Think for a minute about what you would like to achieve. What are the activities that are challenging for you? Take a few moments to think about this before you progress any further with this video. So in the previous video about pain, we were learning about the oversensitive nervous system, including our overprotective brain. And one of the problems with an oversensitive system is that when we try and do more activity, our brain doesn't like it because it thinks we're in danger, so it tries to protect us with more pain. So you may have tried pushing through the pain. I'm guessing this has just made things worse. How do you decide when it's time to stop something? Is it when the pain or fatigue gets so bad that you can't go on? Well, that's a very common way to do things, but unfortunately, if you have an overprotective brain, that approach just makes everything worse. Your brain tries to stop you doing anything it thinks will hurt you, and so it gives you more pain, even sooner. You can see from this picture that over time, our brain becomes so good at protecting us that we can do less and less before the pain comes on, and we take longer and longer to recover. You may have noticed this for yourself. So what is the answer? Well, the good news is that we can calm down our sensitive nervous system and retrain our brain to be less protective. The bad news is that this takes time and perseverance. And there are some specific ways that can help you to retrain your brain to cope better with activity. These techniques don't just help with managing pain, but also managing with fatigue. And we're going to look at these in more detail. So now we're going to talk about pacing. You may have been told you must pace yourself, but what does that actually mean and why is it important? Well, pacing is a way of calming down the brain by stopping activities before your body, the pain or fatigue, tells you to. Now, this is very difficult to do because it doesn't feel natural to stop when you feel like you can go on. But the problem is that by pushing until the pain tells you to stop, you're actually causing your brain to become more protective, which will mean you will get pain even sooner. So to pace your activities, you should try and do small amounts of activity with frequent rest breaks. This takes a bit of trial and error, as it means trying to work out how long you can do an activity before your pain or fatigue get worse. We call this your baseline, and it's a starting point which you can then build on. Pacing is also about varying the types of activity you do. So activities all have different types of demands: physical, cognitive, social and emotional. Activities that you can do sitting down, for example sorting out your banking, might be less physically demanding than, say, cleaning, but will be cognitively demanding because of the amount of concentration you need. Using your brain can be just as exhausting as using your body. And remember that all types of activity will increase your fatigue. So chatting to a friend on the phone may not feel very demanding, but it does use energy. Anything that causes stress will also increase your pain and fatigue. So once you have found your Goldilocks zone of activity, that's the just right amount, if you remember the Goldilocks fairy tale, then you can begin to build on it. And I will come to this shortly. So what about planning and prioritising? We often have routines of activities that we do when we are well that don't always work for us when we have pain and fatigue. It is good to stop and think about what we're doing, when and how we are doing it. If possible, it's good to spread out activities over the day and the week. You probably can't do everything that you want to do, so think about the activities that are most important and make them a priority. Perhaps some jobs don't need to be done so often. Have you ever started a job and then struggled to finish it? Perhaps you've pushed yourself to get it done. It's really hard to leave a job not finished, which means we can be tempted to push through until it's done and then suffer later. If you think about breaking down jobs into smaller tasks, it may be easier to stop when you need to. There are lots of jobs that we do that could be broken down into smaller chunks and spread across the day or week. So for example, cleaning the bathroom could be a job that is just too much for you, but if you broke it down into different tasks, so cleaning the toilet, cleaning the sink, cleaning the shower, etc., you could set yourself one task to do rather than the whole job. It will then be easier to stop. As we've already mentioned, it's hard to stop when the job is not finished, but it will also mean you can spread the tasks throughout the week. Problem solving is a really useful tool when you're struggling. So if you're struggling with an activity, think about all the ways you could tackle it differently. How could you break it up so you can pace it? Are there any changes you could make to the environment? For example, keeping things in the kitchen that you use often in easy-to-reach places. Perhaps there's a piece of equipment that might help, like a long-handled weeder in the garden or an electric tin opener. Most of us don't like to ask for help, but sometimes it's necessary. And remember that most of us do like to be helpful. We like to be able to help other people. So if you do ask for help, you're giving someone else the opportunity to be helpful and to feel good about themselves. So how can we start to increase our activity levels? In order to calm down the oversensitive nervous system, we have to start by working within our pain limits, not pushing through them. But this isn't the end of the story. The whole point is that as your brain becomes less protective, you can start to do more without it overreacting. So when you feel you've got your activity levels more even, then you can start to gradually increase by very small amounts at a time. This graph shows how small increases can lead to you doing more over time. in comparison to the boom and bust pattern, which leads to a reduction in activity levels and longer periods of rest. This takes time. This doesn't happen overnight. But if you can work out what is a manageable level of activity for you, then you will be able to gradually build things up over time. Fatigue can be as disabling as pain, and all the techniques we have just described are useful for managing fatigue as well as pain. Managing energy levels is really important, as pushing too hard can cause the fatigue to get worse. In the same way as it's not good to do too much on a day when your pain is lower, it's not good to do too much on a day when you feel you've got more energy, as this can result in a crash on the following days. It's useful to think of the concept of energy in terms of a battery with a limited capacity. Every activity will use up energy, and this doesn't just apply to physical activities. Mental, social and emotional activities will drain your battery just as much. Fatigue will also be affected by stress and anxiety, as they cause tension which uses up energy. And feeling low in mood will also make you feel more tired. Now, the capacity of your battery may fluctuate. Some days you may feel you have less battery charge than others. It's important to understand how to work with the energy that you have and try to conserve energy for the activities that are most important to you. Think about the things that deplete your battery. This might be something physical, like walking upstairs or having a shower, or it could be a stressful situation such as supporting a friend who's going through a difficult time. Rest helps to recharge and can provide extra energy. Rest is not the same as just stopping being active. Effective rest involves relaxation. Everyone is different, so try and find what helps you to relax. You could try some of the techniques in the workbook section on stress. If you struggle to allow yourself to rest completely, you may choose to do something which helps you to relax, such as reading a book or chatting to a friend. Enjoyable activities can also help to recharge us by giving us a psychological boost, but they will still use energy, so balance is important. There are some very practical tips in the workbook on ways of adapting activities so they use less energy. Here's an example for shopping. So for the activity, think about what you need to do to prioritise, to plan and to pace. These are some ideas that you could use, but the principles can be applied to every activity that we do. In order to plan our activities effectively, we need an understanding of what we're doing now. And one way of doing this is to think about the activities you do and grade them according to how demanding they are. Remember that all activity is demanding, even those we really enjoy. One way to grade the activities is to think of a traffic light system of low, medium and high demanding activities. Those that are high, red, would be activities that you know are very demanding for you. Green activities would be those that are very relaxing, and amber would be the activities that are demanding but generally manageable. A useful way of looking at the activities you are doing is to keep an activity diary. So write down what you do over a week period. You can then underline or colour code the activities as red, amber or green. Looking at your timetable this way can easily help you to see how your activities are distributed and how this affects your recovery time. So you may notice that your pain and fatigue are worse when you have done more red activities. You can then look at spreading these activities out throughout the week. There's a blank copy of this diary in the workbook, and we would really encourage you to have a go at filling one in. So what have we learnt? Well, we've learnt today that there are things we can do to calm down our overprotective pain system. This is not easy, but it does make a difference. It does take time and effort to make the changes, and I would advise you to try one change at a time. Don't put too much pressure on yourself to change everything at once, because if you can't manage it, you may feel discouraged and give up. It's always good to be able to see positive change, so it's a good idea to keep a note of what you're doing and any changes you experience. Don't forget to refer to the workbook for more tips and ideas.